right. Greetings, everyone. This is Dominic from the Comic Book Report, here to do an interview with the great Alex Segura. Alex, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Dominic. This will be fun.
Awesome. And a special thank you to everyone at Dynamite Comics for coordinating this and getting this set up for all of us. Definitely appreciate it. Okay, Alex, well, I have a couple questions for you today. Thank you again for your time. But without bearing a lead, I thought we'd just dive right into kind of what we're talking about today a little bit, which is your upcoming project, Green Hornet and Miss Fury over at Dynamite. I would just love to know, how did you get involved with this project?
Yeah, it was sometimes projects are long, drawn out affairs, and sometimes they're super easy. And this was one of those situations where it was easy. My editor, Joe Corallo, reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you like the Green Hornet?" And I said, "Yes, 100%." And that's really what got the conversation going. And we drilled down, and the book became Green Hornet, Miss Fury, which I think adds a layer of intrigue to the whole thing. Then we brought on Henry Barajas to co-write, and Federico Ceresa as the artist, and it's just been a cool ride so far.
Very, very cool. So I guess right off the bat, something I want to just touch on. I am admittedly a little bit newer to your body of work, but I'm kind of noticing a bit of a pattern as far as some of the genre work, I would say. Maybe like, I know you're affiliated with like the Dick Tracy series they have going on right now. And I know there's an upcoming Question series coming out over at DC. Do you find yourself gravitating towards this kind of street level comic book characters, maybe detective flares or noir kind of flair, or are these just a couple projects that happen to be in that wheelhouse?
No, I think my background is I'm a crime novelist. I've written almost a dozen crime novels or novels, period. I had a Private Eye series set in Miami, and then wrote Secret Identity, which won the LA Times Book Prize. Alter Ego comes out this December. And as a fan, I've always gravitated to kind of street level superheroes like Batman or Daredevil or Dick Tracy and Green Hornet. I do bigger stuff in terms of scope. Like I'm writing Star Wars Battle of Jakku for Marvel, Spider Society, and a bunch of other things. But I would definitely say that no, it's not a stretch that I lean towards kind of pulp noir characters. Even when doing other stories in different genres, my headspace is usually, well, what's the crime here?
Right. Very cool. If I could pry a little bit, and if you don't want to answer, that's okay. What do you think was your initial draw to this genre? Is this something you've always been fascinated with? Do you enjoy this as a fan of this in fiction, or did you find just from a writing standpoint, you just kind of clicked toward that direction?
Oh yeah, no, I started as a fan. I was really into like stuff like Sherlock Holmes, Edgar Allan Poe, Agatha Christie as a kid, and then
Love Agatha Christie.
I got into true crime as I got older, and PI novels and crime fiction. As just a fan, I would go to like BoucherCon, which is the big crime fiction convention, as just a reader, obviously with the hope of writing novels at some point. But and that applies to Dick Tracy, going back to when I first saw the movie, and Green Hornet when I first saw the TV show, the 60s TV show. I was intrigued by these characters, and these characters like Green Hornet particularly feels very much kind of from the same cloth as Batman, who I love. And I think there are ways to play it where you can differentiate the two characters and make the Hornet stand out. And Miss Fury is one of the oldest pulp characters in comics history, and I think is really fascinating to see the two characters kind of play off each other.
I was going to say both of those characters that are billing the book over here at Dynamite, Miss Fury and Green Hornet, certainly have a long pedigree, or at least a long history. So I'm really fascinated to see kind of what your approach is. And I think having those two together is pretty novel. Have they ever crossed over before? Or
no, I mean, not in this direct way. I think maybe they were, maybe they've appeared in a comic together. I know Dynamite has done like pulp hero crossover books before involving all their characters, but I think what Henry and I wanted to do most of all is make it feel like the story counts, give these characters a shared history, kind of interweave them into each other's stories, so it feels like this moment is of import. It's not just like this character meets that character and crazy things happen, and it doesn't really add to the legacy of either. We wanted to make it feel like this is a story that is important to both of the heroes.
I honestly love hearing that. I feel like with a lot of crossovers, you don't always have that as like
Yeah.
an aim or an anchor for a lot of creators. So I love hearing that right from the jump. I think that already it sounds good to me.
Yeah, I mean, as a
Um,
reader, as a young comics reader, would usually be turned off by like intercompany crossovers. Not that this is
yeah,
intercompany, but it is two IP that
sure.
one's a licensed character and one is in house. But I was always turned off by those kind of stories because I thought, oh well, there's going to be no repercussions from this story. It's just like a fun
Yeah,
romp, which is great for what it is. But Henry and I really wanted to make this feel like it counted and that it would have repercussions. There's some
yeah,
crossovers like that, like Superman Alien or
sure.
Wildcats. Like there's like half of Stormwatch dies in Wildcats Alien, and that leads into the Authority.
Yeah,
But stuff like that. We wanted to have some impact and show readers things that maybe they hadn't seen before with these characters.
I love that. I love hearing that. Honestly, I'm even more excited for this project after hearing you kind of speak to that a little
Oh,
bit.
good, great.
Um, I would like to pivot if you don't mind. I am very curious, and honestly, when I found out I was going to have a chance to speak to you, I think one of the biggest questions I had is I haven't had an opportunity to speak to many comic book creators who are also successful novelists.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked to some that are into production or producing or different other kind of like cartoon animation or things like that, but I don't know if I've spoken to someone who's a proper novelist and a comic book writer. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a crossover that I'm really excited to hear a little bit about. Can
Yeah.
we talk a little bit about how that came to be? What came first? How did this all kind of begin?
Yeah, wow, that's a big question. I think I always wanted to tell stories. Like I grew up reading comics, but I was also an avid just reader. I read novels, sci-fi novels, a lot of like franchise novels. Like I remember reading a short story Spider-Man collection when I was younger.
Wow.
Um, so both things really happened kind of at the same time. My first comic story was a short in a DC Halloween special. I was on staff at DC doing publicity, and back then it was frowned upon. If you were on staff, you weren't really supposed to be pitching stories, but they gave me an opportunity.
Yeah.
And then I moved to Archie to do publicity at Archie, and one of the benefits of that was that I was also able to write for the company. So I wrote a bunch of one-off Archie stories and stuff like Archie Meets Kiss, Archie Meets Ramones, and things like
Oh,
that.
nice.
Really fun. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I was also pursuing this career as a novelist. So I was writing the Pete Fernandez Private Eye series, which got some acclaim and did pretty well. And you you sometimes feel like you're the oldest overnight success because I've been kind of cranking on this for over a decade, and now things are kind of gelling in a cool way. But you have to also be mindful that it's a marathon. So yeah, it's always been a passion for stories. It was never really novels or comics first, but they were always kind of feeding off each other, and so yeah, it's been fun. It's been amazing to be able to play with some of these characters that meant so much to me as a reader.
Awesome. I guess with that, do you find that your process is very different for comics versus novel writing? Or when it gets down to the actual reading portion, is it fairly similar? I mean, obviously the formatting is quite a bit different, but is your approach as a writer pretty similar or pretty divergent as far as that goes?
Yeah, the formatting is different. Comics are obviously more collaborative, and novels you're really working on your own and trying
Right.
to be the director, the screenwriter, and the manager of all things. Whereas with comics, it's almost like you're in a band. But all my stories start from character. Like, what is the character doing? What are they struggling with? And what is the story that's most compelling to this character? Like, what can I take away? What can I make difficult for this character to make it work in terms of entertainment? And then you kind of take that idea and filter it through the medium. Like if it's a novel, like how do I'm an outliner. I outline my novels and my
Right.
comics pretty tightly. With comics, it's a little bit looser. Like I know roughly what I'm doing every issue of the arc, but I try to give myself enough wiggle room to make it interesting for me as a writer, so I can say, "Oh, well, let's kill this character here," and you can make it work. But
Yeah.
that also applies to novels. My outlines are pretty tight, but they're also not limiting in that if something takes me in a different direction, I'd rather the outline pivot to the cool story idea as opposed to me refusing the character a chance to do something organic. Because once the characters start doing stuff on their own and start moving and talking on their own, that's a wave that you really want to ride and you want
Right.
to allow that to continue. So if you're stifling that and you're like, well, my outline says Green Hornet has to go into this apartment in the next scene, not have this long debate with Miss Fury. But that debate seems really more compelling and interesting in terms of character. You need to be able to let that happen. And so that's what I try to do. Try to be able to open the door for those opportunities while still having, like a roadmap in your car so you don't get lost.
I love that. And honestly, like as a fan of fiction novels and comics and hearing a little bit behind the scenes in interviews and things like that, I find that writers that do follow kind of the voices of the characters, those scenes end up feeling a lot more true because you're not just serving your initial idea of it as much as where is this character like living and breathing and going. And I don't
Well,
know.
you also don't want your plots to feel interchangeable. Like if you're writing a question story, you don't want to feel like Animal Man or Swamp Thing could work in that setting with the same conflict, the same issues. Like the stories have to spring from character. And obviously when you're doing corporate characters that are owned by companies and you're there as a shepherd or you're just kind of there as a temporary creative, you have to keep in mind what came before, but also, one big thing that I hear that really resonates with me is consistency over continuity. Like you take the pieces and the stories that mean the most to you, that kind of help you tell the story you're going to tell. You don't ignore the big stuff, but you don't have to respond or react to every story that's ever happened because it's just not, then you're just vamping or just like checking boxes or comics about comics as opposed to writing something that speaks to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can definitely see that. Very cool. I guess talking about characters a little bit more, obviously with something like Green Hornet and Miss Fury, we have these established kind of IP situations. And I know that you've also done a lot of just completely created own characters and stuff.
Yeah.
I guess it sounds like you're a longer term fan. I know you cited Batman and Daredevil. There's some favorites of mine as well.
Yeah.
Is there a character like that for maybe one of the big two, Marvel DC, that you would love to try your hand at if the opportunity presented itself or for the right offer kind of stuff? Is there a character or a sandbox you've really wanted to play in that you maybe haven't had an opportunity yet to do so?
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's always, I've been very blessed. I've gotten to write a lot of Spider-Man stuff, a lot of Star Wars stuff.
Yeah.
The Question obviously is a dream. Like she's my favorite DC character, but
that's amazing.
I would love to, and Dick Tracy was a character that I grew up like loving, but yeah, I'd love to write Batman. I'm writing a Daredevil novel for Marvel, which is coming out next year. I'm in the thick of it.
Wow.
But Daredevil is one of those characters that I've literally read every issue of his series. Like just one of those characters that I just love. And I feel like is very unique in terms of being this really conflicted, messy character who is also a really good superhero and does good things, but is also kind of a screw up. And I find that really fascinating. And like core Peter Parker Spider-Man was probably my guy for the longest time as a fan and still is. Like I always keep up with what he's doing. So it's been fun to kind of dance around him. Like he shows up in Spider Society and shows up in different stories, but I got to write one Peter Parker Spider-Man story for Marvel Zombies, Black, White, and Blood, which was really fun.
Oh, wow.
And that was a really dark story. But those are, and the X-Men. I love the X-Men. I'm kind of an X-Men obsessive. So anything to do in the, those buckets would be great to play in, or those sandboxes. But also whenever I have an idea, you ask yourself, like, is this a work for hire story, or is it something that I can just do on my own and control and own? And, I love doing work for hire, but it can also be fleeting. Like you never know when an editor is going to move on to somebody else. And so you have to, there always has to be a venue for your stories. And so that's why creator owned is great, because if I have a story idea and those opportunities haven't presented themselves, I can always do them myself.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you for sharing that. I love that. Daredevil is my personal favorite. So I'm all about that. I'm excited to hear you writing a novel about that though.
It's been really fun to kind of read. I've basically reread all the Daredevil stuff to kind of figure out like, what is my story and who I want to evoke. And that's been really fun to think about.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm excited for that. I'll have to keep my eyes peeled. You said next year is when it's tentatively.
Next summer, probably. Yeah.
Woo. Okay. Well, that's not too far away. So
tell me about it as I write the book.
Yeah. No pressure.
Yeah.
Awesome. I guess going back to let's switch over back to comics again. You mentioned how comics can sometimes feel like being a part of a band, and I know that you've had what look like some incredible collaborators in the past. I mean, some of the artists and stuff attached to your books are pretty amazing at just helping create and foster that atmosphere you're doing with the writing. But are there some dream collaborators that you'd like to work with from like the penciler side or maybe, I don't know, colorists or things like that you're like, okay, or is it really, kind of case by case?
Oh, no. I mean, I've been very blessed. Sandy Jarrell, who did the comic sequences in Secret Identity, and we did the links together. is a dream to work with and one of my favorite collaborators. I love working with David Hahn, who did The Dusk. Kian Torme, who is doing The Question, is fantastic. Scott Godlewski, who did Spider Society, is great. I got to work with Salvador LaRocca on a bunch of Spider-Man shorts.
Whoa, yeah.
Javi Fernandez did that Marvel Zombie story I mentioned to you, and I'm sure I'm forgetting someone, like working with guys like Leonard Kirk and Stefano Raphael and Jethro Morales and Luke Ross on Battle of Jakku has just been wild. Like, these are people I would read as a fan.
Yeah.
And, you know, people on creator-owned stuff like George Cambadeas on Black Ghost or Dean Kotz on The Awaken. I'm sure I'm forgetting someone. Geraldo, who does Dick Tracy, is stupendous. You know, I would love to work with like people like Jerry Ordway is one of my favorite artists.
Wow. Yeah.
Literally one of just, if he draws it, I will read it no matter who's written it. Lee Weeks is fantastic. Just a stunning penciler. Like, his Daredevil run was one of my formative like reading experiences as a kid, and he just gets better and better. Marguerite Sauvage, who's super talented, and I know her from her Archie work when I was there, and she continues to like really just level up. Veronica Fish is great and a great artist. I could go on and on. Like, there's so many artists that I'd love to work with, but and Jorge Fornes, who's done great work in Batman and Rorschach and Daredevil. Like, just yeah, I've got a running list of people I would love to work with.
Yeah, I love that. Honestly, I was just thinking about Lee Weeks this week. That's so funny. So very,
so
such an iconic style. Like, his vision of Daredevil is just really, you remember it. You remember seeing it.
When I think of Daredevil, like, I know a lot of people think of Frank Miller or think of, you know, I think of David Mazzucchelli and I think of Lee Weeks. Those are like my definitive Daredevil, and John Romita Jr. Those are like, that's like my trinity of Daredevil visuals.
That's great. I came to Daredevil a little bit later, so for me, I look like visually, I think like Alex Maleev, like that Bendis era, just my brain just jumps over to that. But oh man, Daredevil's been spoiled with creators.
I mean, to go from like Bendis to Brubaker to Diggle to Wade to Charles Soule, Zdarsky, like, it's a murderer's row of talent.
I think he's one of the most consistently well written and well like creator drawn books in like recent decades of a lot of
I think it goes even before Miller. Like, I think a lot of people discount the pre-Miller stuff because they feel like that was just kind of hokey, but I mean, you have Stan Lee, you have Marv Wolfman, Jerry Conway,
Gene Colan on art. To me, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's just all over the place.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, well, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about some of these projects. We've talked about it a little bit, but is there anything you can share about your upcoming question series?
Oh, sure. I joke around that I'm only doing like people with colored fedoras, like The Question, Green Hornet, but The Question is interesting because I did a series of shorts in Batman Brave and the Bold that just ended, where we kind of see her dealing with this villain from her past who's trying to destroy her life as commissioner of Gotham. But now, as we know, like, she's moving on to the Justice League Watchtower, like in the wake of all the All-In stuff. And so it's really a murder mystery set on this superhero watchtower that's going to be loaded with Easter eggs and guest stars. And her role is very much like the head of security of the watchtower. And so she has to make sure that this place that is welcoming to all heroes is safe for them as well. And what happens when someone tries to break through that and use this watchtower as a weapon as opposed to the safe haven that it is. And I think what's been fun about that, obviously, is working with Kian, who's a fantastic artist and really like is getting the noir vibe we're trying to give off, but also just a lot of fun Easter eggs, and a lot of the supporting cast we've gotten to build around Renee as The Question has been fantastic and really like a dream. Like, I think a lot of people will be pleasantly surprised by some of the characters that we get to show off.
Yeah. I love hearing that. Honestly, The Question is such I mean, I started reading The Question back when it was like, Vic Sage with Dennis O'Neil and Denny Callan. I mean, you're not going to, that to me is just such an iconic, what I've read of that run is anyway. And like,
my guiding lights for this book are obviously the Denny and Dennis Cowan run. But also Greg Rucka's stuff with Renee is so essential and so integral to the character. Like, I went back and reread that, like his stuff with Cully, but also the stuff in 52 where she basically becomes the Question and takes the mantle from Vic. And it's really like an exploration of her character. Like, how can she overcome her issues and problems and fears to be the hero of heroes almost.
Yeah. Honestly, like, that was one of my favorite parts about 52, like, and as much as I love Vic Sage, like, I wouldn't have thought Montoya for that, but as soon as I saw it, I was like, this is kind of brilliant. I mean, this character is anyway just so
Yeah,
conducive
no,
to
I mean, you
that.
go
And
back to Gotham Central, the stuff that
yeah,
Brubaker and Rucka did with Michael Lark and the
mhm,
team, establishing her character, that arc with Two Face, like it's just
yeah,
she's one of the most explored characters in terms of just how we know her. We know her inner workings, and so to get
yeah,
her right, I feel like you have to understand who she is as a character and what she would do in those situations. And I think maybe initially people are like, "Oh, wait, she's on. This is not a grounded story. She's on the Watchtower, like with all these superheroes." But it is a Renee story. Like it's very
yeah.
much from her character and from her viewpoint. So yes, it's not a usual setting for her, but I think she's also succeeded in those settings before, like in 52 or other
Yeah.
situations. So I think it. I hope people check it out, and I hope they enjoy it.
I love that. And when is that coming out? Forgive me for not having that written down.
I believe it's November 20th. It's definitely November, so it's right around the same
Awesome.
time as Green Hornet. So it'll be a busy month.
Awesome. So everyone, if you haven't yet, go to your LCS, go to those local comic shops, make sure
Yeah,
you get that on your pull list. I love that.
thank you.
Um, and then I do want to touch on, I know that you have a forthcoming novel as well. And I know a lot of people that might be coming to my channel, I know come specifically for comics, but you are a comic book writer as well. And I know, like me, I'm a fan of both mediums. And I would
Good.
love to
Yeah.
hear a little bit about Alter Ego, if you don't mind, or
Yeah,
what you
for sure.
can share,
It's like
for
a
those
kind
that
of a three-pronged narrative. Like Alter Ego, we're calling it a standalone sequel to Secret Identity. And Secret Identity was a murder mystery set in 70s New York comic
Mhm.
book industry. It follows this woman, Carmen Valdez, who wants to work in comics and moves to New York to work in comics, but she gets a job as a secretary, and her boss basically tells her, "Look, you can't pitch me stories. Don't pitch me comic ideas. I've got people to do it." So
Mhm.
the only way she can create a comic is anonymously in collaboration with a colleague who says, "Hey, I got this assignment. Why don't you co-write it with me and create this new character, the
Mhm.
Lynx, and eventually I'll tell people that you helped me." Um, but what happens is her collaborator is murdered, and so she has to investigate his murder to kind of figure out to reclaim this character, the Lynx. And in the novel Secret Identity, you see pages of the comic she creates,
Mhm.
drawn by Sandy. That it was just like a dream come true to blend mystery and crime novels. And so Alter Ego jumps to the present day. It follows this filmmaker, Annie Bustamante, who used to work in comics. She had a successful career as an artist in comics, but was pulled away, just got turned off by the industry and moved on to do movies. But in her spare time, she draws this comic for fun based on this character that meant so much to her as a kid, the Lynx.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so when she's approached by this startup entertainment company, Triumph Entertainment, who are relaunching the universe of Triumph characters, and they ask her to relaunch the character, the Lynx, in comics, she can't say no. But as she digs deeper into the story of who created the Lynx and what is behind the Lynx, she finds that her life is threatened, people start dying, and
Wow.
the truth is much more shocking than what she's been told. And this story also has comic book interstitial pages drawn by Sandy, but it's Annie's comic. And so I don't want to say much more, but that's the
Of
springboard.
course.
And at the same time, in November, Mad Cave is we'd say reprinting the first four issues of the Legendary Lynx, drawn
Wow.
by Doug Detmer, who's the character in the novel, and written by Harvey Stern. But it's really written by me and drawn by Sandy Jarrell. But it's
Yeah.
a nice little metatextual thing. So
Wow.
you can read Secret Identity, read the Lynx comics, and also read Alter Ego, and you'll get the big picture. Or you can read each thing separately as you see fit, and you'll still get hopefully a nice, entertaining story in each installment.
I love the kind of connective tissue you have there. I didn't
Well,
know about that. Little collection of comics coming out in November. That is
yeah, yeah,
amazing. I think,
yeah, and we're
especially for
trying to do
fans
it
of the
as
Secret Identity.
trying to be as meta as possible. Like
Yeah.
this Lost Classic is being reprinted, and that's been really fun because after Secret Identity came out, I did get emails from people saying I went to my LCS and I couldn't find any Lynx comics, and I tried to find it on the comic book database and I couldn't find it, which
Yeah.
is it really just means that you succeeded as a storyteller enough that
Yeah.
people want to believe that this existed, and now it does exist in some way. So if you want to believe it, you can read it and enjoy it, or if you're in on the joke, you can still enjoy it because it exists now.
I love that. Well, hey, everyone look out for that. That's so
Yeah,
exciting.
thank you.
Um, well, very cool. I mean, it sounds like you are loaded with a ton of great projects coming up for all of us fans to check out.
Yeah.
I think even your Dick Tracy stuff's getting collected in like a paperback in a couple
Yeah,
months,
the
if I'm
first
not
volume
mistaken.
of the Dick Tracy series is coming out, I believe, also in November. That's me and Mike Morrissey on writing, and Geraldo Borges on art. Great colorist Mark Englert, and Jim Campbell on letters, and Chantel Amy Osmond is the creative consultant. And so, yeah, I think the first arc has gotten a great response. Fans seem really into it. Retailers have been really supportive, and we're just a couple issues into the next arc. So hopefully that'll keep chugging along.
Love that. I love hearing that. Honestly, I can't wait hopefully to get that collection when it comes out. I know I've liked what I've checked out so far.
Awesome.
So very cool. Okay, going back to some maybe rapid fire kinds of questions with the remainder of our time here. Got a couple minutes left, and again, thank you so much for your time.
Of course.
We've talked about some of your upcoming projects. We've dabbled a little bit on your bibliography, but a question I'd like to ask some creators is, what do you think is a great, like if you could pick maybe 2 to 3 titles of yours, and in your case, whether it be novels or comics, that you think would give people a good, I mean, you've had a lot of diversity in your writing, but maybe like quintessential Alex Segura titles. What would you point to like just a random person on the street wanting to check out your stuff? What are like 2 or 3 titles?
Great. I think the one book that I think covers all the bases in terms of the things I like and obsess over would be Secret Identity. Like there you get a taste of comics, you get a taste of mystery, you get a taste of like metafiction and kind of speculative. In terms of comics, I was really proud of Spider Society #1. I thought that was a fun debut that evoked the tone of the movies, but also was very much in the Marvel universe. So that was really fun to play with. And yeah, I think the first issue of The Question is going to surprise some people in a good way.
Awesome. Okay, I love hearing that, honestly.
Yeah.
And I think with Alter Ego,
and I want to give a shout out to Federico Ceresa and Henry Barajas, the team on Green Hornet and Miss Fury, because don't sleep on the art. I think people are going to get so surprised by how great his art is. This is his first like mainstream work. He was a art student. I found him on Instagram, and I was just like, dude, we have to work on something together. Like, and he immediately tapped into Green Hornet. He gets better with every issue. Henry and I are just kind of like, our jaws are on the floor every time he sends new pages. He's got this Greg Smallwoody style, very hyper detailed, but he doesn't shy away from being creative with page layouts, and his storytelling is just spot on. So I think he's going to be a star.
Awesome.
Happy to have him for a little while.
I honestly love to get recommendations, especially with some up and coming people in the industry. So definitely we'll be checking that out on Green Hornet and Miss Fury. Awesome. Okay. And then another question I had is, it sounds like you've been a comic book fan for quite some time. Now, going away from your work for a minute, are there 2 or 3 comic runs that you would say, hey, these are great runs to check out, that you would recommend to like a friend who wanted to get into comics? Something that maybe you enjoyed personally.
I mean, the runs that I always go back to that will probably show my age are like Chris Claremont's X-Men run, like the whole 16-year initial run, like just to me is a masterclass in superhero stories as a novel. Like it's a novelistic story. Characters leave, characters come back, plot threads dangle for years and get resolved like years later. And it's a great, just magnificent subtext for a book that was under the comics code. Like he was working on so many levels, and it just like I reread that run every couple years, and each year I take something new from it. And another great run is Love and Rockets. I love Love and Rockets. I think it's a fantastic comic. I love what Gilbert does. I'm really particular to the Jaime stuff, like Locas. And if you don't know Love and Rockets, it's really hard to pin it down. But the Locas stories are about a group of friends that start out as these like gutter punks in Huerta in LA, in California. And it follows 2 characters, Maggie and Hopi, but also all their friends like Penny Century and Daffy and all these great characters. And it takes a bunch of little detours into their past and what brought them together. But most interestingly, it kind of, they age in real time. So now, like 40 years into the story, like Maggie and Hopi are middle-aged or older and like have kids and are married, or Hopi has a stepdaughter, a stepkid. But you follow their lives. It's not like superheroes where everyone's always like 25 and looks great. And you kind of have to manage the sliding time scale of it all. But it's really fantastic. Another run that I'll mention here is Grant Morrison's Animal Man run with Chaz Schwab and a few other artists. Like, I love the meta stuff, but I also love the fourth wall breaking that they do in that story. And I think if I had to choose one run as my favorite superhero run, it would probably be Animal Man.
Wow.
Yeah. Also, I really love like Matt Fraction and David Aja's Hawkeye.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm forgetting some people, but those are the ones that come top of mind.
Awesome. I know I've Love and Rockets is easily not like anything I've ever read before.
Yeah.
I've dabbled a little. I mean, and the breadth of what they've done there. I've read a small sliver, but I think that's
Yeah.
definitely one that not enough people talk about. Certainly,
It's amazing. I'm so happy every time I get a new issue in the mail, and I'm so glad it exists. And
Yeah.
I was so blessed to have Jaime do a few covers at Archie when I was there. He did the Archie.
Wow.
Did a cover for Archie Meets Ramones and the Archie's #1, which he's just the best, just an amazing. And he comes from his background is very in the school of like Dan DeCarlo, Harry Lucy, and those kind of classic Archie artists, and Hank Ketchum, who did Dennis the Menace. So his storytelling is just magnificent.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, well, if we could just go ahead and close it on this one question.
Yeah.
Do you have any anecdotes about your time on Archie? Honestly, I forgot about that. You brought it back up, and I grew up with Archie, grabbing them from the grocery stores and things like that. So,
I mean, it was a thrill. Like I was happy to have had my time there, not only as a staff member, but as a creative person, because I grew up on those characters. And I think what's funny is I went from DC to Archie as a publicity person, and a lot of people were like, well, why would you leave Superman and Batman? But to me, Archie was up there with those characters because he's such an identifiable part of pop culture. Mm-hmm. Betty and Veronica are iconic. Jughead, Reggie, like the dream in terms of characters is to have characters that are so defined just by looking at them. And you can show somebody Archie and somebody knows already who that is. They know the interplay and dynamic between Betty and Veronica and Jughead and Reggie and Pop Tates and Sabrina and Josie. And so it's just part of Americana. And I thought that was really a real true honor to be able to tell stories with those characters.
I love it. I love it so much. And I think there's so many people, maybe some people watching now on the video that probably got started in Archie. Honestly, those were easily some of the earliest comics I ever had a chance to read myself. So love hearing the anecdote. And again, thank you so much for your time, Alex, and everyone out there. Please be on the lookout for Green Hornet, Miss Fury coming out from Dynamite. We got The Question coming out of DC. We got the novel Alter Ego coming out. We got a comic collection linked into that universe coming out, and so much of this in November. So there's still time. Go to your comic shops, get ready. And Alex, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thanks so much, Dominic. It was a pleasure.
All righty, and thanks again to everyone at Dynamite. And hope you guys all have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks again for watching today's interview. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and give this video a like, maybe comment, and check out another video on your way out. Thanks, and have a good one.